I want to bring in MS Now's Ines de la Cuetara in Jerusalem. Retired Army Major General James Marks, Director of Allied Critical Metals, and Jamil Jaffer is founder and executive director of National Security Institute and former White House Associate Counsel under President George W. Bush. Jamil, what's your reaction to the president who on one hand is saying he wants this over soon and then saying, well, but it won't be over until Iran is no longer a threat?
Well, Chris, clearly the president's trying to figure out a path forward here. He's trying to figure out how long he can stay in this fight without losing his political base, without losing support here in the United States, while also taking the fight to the Iranians and ensuring that they can't have a nuclear weapon, ensuring that maybe the Iranian people are able to rise up, as he talked about in his first message, but certainly take out their ballistic missile capabilities in their Navy. We've done some significant damage, but the real question is, what is the end state that the U.S. wants to look like? Is it a supreme leader that we can work with, as the president said it 2 days ago, or is it something else? We don't really know because the story keeps changing every day.
And, General, when the story changes, I wonder if the president's remarks specifically about a timeline influence military strategy on the ground, or they have a plan, they're executing that plan until they're told to stop.
Oh, the planning continues. What you routinely do is you work through what's called branches and sequels. What's going to happen if we have excessive victories or wins? And what will we do when we run into a challenge and we have to pivot off of that? So that takes place as a matter of routine. I think what we're seeing really is this is kind of the end of the beginning. Let's go back to the post-Desert Storm construct. After Desert Storm and we pushed the Iraqi military out of Kuwait, we created a Operation Northern Watch and Southern Watch where we boxed in the Iraqi military. And over the course of 12 years, we conducted air patrols and we went after Iraq when they stepped out of bounds, out of this prescribed box. I think we're now in the point where the volume, velocity of the fire, of the strikes will decrease and will be a more sustainable pace. And as I think it's crystal clear, if we can detect increased production and a focus on missile development and enriched uranium, nuclear development, and activities by the proxies, Israel and the United States will remain engaged.
So are you suggesting that on different levels, this could go on for years?
I think it could on different levels. Chris, I think what you're describing is exactly that. What the United States and Israel has been able to achieve, albeit there is a new supreme leader. He is not a friend of the United States. He is not a friend of the region. This guy is going to be boxed in and be isolated like his father. The challenge is IRGC remains in control, and this is an internal control mechanism. They've decreased their ability to export terrorism, although we can talk about sleeper cells and all that other stuff, which is critical. Of course, we're in a period of enhanced vigilance. But yes, there could be an ongoing operation not dissimilar to what we saw in Iraq, and the only reason it terminated is when we went to war against Iraq in 2003.
So, Jamil, do you agree with that, first of all? And second of all, if part of the equation is to get a different government in place, a government more acceptable, for lack of a better term, to the United States, have we learned something, for example, just to take out the leader of Hamas? Because there's always somebody who's willing to go in and to keep that going. How do you see it?
Well, look, certainly they're going to replace the leader. They've replaced him now, Ali Khamenei, with his son, Mojtaba Khamenei. And there's a line of clerics that could come into play here. But the real question is how do the Iranian people rise up, as the president called upon them to do, when you've got 190,000 Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, another 300,000 regular army, and 600,000 Basij, the sort of paramilitary militia? With all those forces, if we're not taking out all those forces, it's going to be very hard for the Iranian people to rise up and take over their government, take back their government, and get the kind of freedom that they want that the president promised them when he said help is on the way. So the real question now becomes, is that an end state we sought to achieve? The president said it on day one. He hasn't really repeated it that often since, except to say he wants a religious leader. He'll accept a religious leader, but he wants one that we can work with, that we would accept. Not clear what that means or who that might even be.
Ines, what is the latest today on the war from your vantage point?
Yeah, Chris, so I mean, huge explosions rocking Tehran overnight. The U.S. says it's continuing to go after deeply buried ballistic missile launchers. We heard from the Pentagon. They say that the number of ballistic missiles fired is down 90%. The number of drones fired is down 83%. I will say Iran's Revolutionary Guard are rejecting those claims. And here in Israel, we have certainly been, dealing with sirens throughout the day. Of course, it's not just the attacks, not just coming from Iran. They're also coming from Hezbollah, as that second front of the war very much rages on. Israel intensifying its campaign on southern Lebanon and on parts of Beirut. A huge plume of smoke seen rising from central Beirut today. Israel says it's targeting Hezbollah strongholds. The UN says that over 700,000 people have been displaced, at least 294 people killed in Lebanon, and over 1,000 injured. The Israelis suffering casualties as well. We know at least 2 IDF soldiers have been killed. At least 1 was severely wounded in the fighting against Hezbollah. There is a sense here that the fighting against Hezbollah could go on potentially for longer than the war with Iran. We're, of course, getting mixed messages from the U.S. as to how long the war with Iran will go on for. But I will say today we also got some mixed messaging from the Israelis. So we heard from the Israeli prime minister saying that the offensive is not done yet. But then just moments ago, we heard from the foreign minister in Israel saying that his government is not seeking an endless war with Iran and that they will coordinate with Washington on when to end hostilities. And of course, we've heard from the Iranians that they do not plan to negotiate with the U.S. We heard the Iranian foreign minister telling PBS that they had a very bitter experience negotiating with the Americans because, it's twice now they were attacked while they were in the midst of negotiations. So they are very much vowing to keep fighting.
Ines, thank you for that. So mixed messaging seems to be a theme that's emerging here, General. But let me play a little bit more of what the secretary said today about the overall goal. Take a listen.
Ultimately, the aftermath is going to be in America's interests, our interests. We won't live under a nuclear blackmail scenario of conventional missiles that can target our people, which is why the objectives have been scoped from the beginning. Missiles, missile production, a defense industrial base, Navy, all in service of ensuring they don't have nuclear power projection capabilities.
Can you, General, accomplish the goal of eliminating the Iran nuclear threat through aerial bombing alone, even one as devastating as the one we're clearly employing?
Well, you can't until you get folks on the ground to validate whether they've got the uranium enrichment program ongoing. However, you can make it incredibly difficult for them to carry on. And that, in my mind, is what I see as the ongoing strategy. There is not going to be, and I think we all would agree, there is not going to be a popular uprising. There's no platform upon which the Iranian people can stand. Remember when the Ayatollah came back in '79, the Shah's Air Force flipped. That became the platform for the protests. The rest is history, right? Over the course of 50 years, we've been living with that. We're not going to see a popular uprising. We are going to continue this maritime and air campaign, and I think it's going to be, as we described, at a more sustainable pace, and it will go after those very specific targets, Chris, that we've been talking about. Nuclear enrichment, R&D facilities, missile development, and going after the proxies if they continue to pop their head up. And as we've discussed, anything beyond that, we can paint this in any way, becomes unnecessarily punitive. We've got to ensure that those red lines are met. And if the Iranian people cannot step up, we're going to keep giving them an opportunity, but we're not going to put boots on the ground. We're not going to do anything, I think, beyond what we see right now going forward.
Jamil, let me read to you part of a post from Iran's Speaker of the Parliament. It said, quote, "We are definitely not looking for a ceasefire. We believe that the aggressor should be punched in the mouth so that he learns a lesson, so that he will never think of attacking our beloved Iran again." So that leads me to the question of whether where this goes is totally in Donald Trump's hands. Is it the decision of the president? Is there a possibility Iran could drag this out? Where does this go? Who makes that decision?
Well, look, it's tough words, obviously, from the Speaker of the Iranian parliament, but they haven't been able to bring the fight as much as they would have wanted to, it looks like. It looks like we have significantly degraded their ballistic missile capabilities and their power projection capabilities. That being said, what we don't know is what we don't know. For all we know, they have a large number of ballistic missiles and drones stored in tunnels that we can't get to or haven't gotten to, and they're waiting for us to waste all of our Patriots and defensive missiles and then coming after us and our allies in the region. They may also have, as General Marks said, sleeper cells planted around the globe, ready to carry out terrorist attacks. We haven't seen that yet, but that may be yet to come. All that being said, the reality is that on a force-on-force war, the U.S. wins it every time, no matter what.
So I want to bring in CNBC's Pippa Stevens. Pippa, at this time yesterday, the markets were down. Oil was right around $100 a barrel, although it spiked beyond that a bit. What's the situation today?
Hey, Chris, so oil prices are down another 10% today after a really dramatic reversal yesterday that did see WTI touch nearly $120. And President Trump said the surge at the pump will be a little glitch, but it is too early to say higher prices will soon be over, given there are still a whole lot of unknowns in terms of where the price of oil might go. The national average at the pump is now the highest since 2024. But while oil prices have come down in the last day, gas prices won't necessarily follow. And there is a saying in the market that the prices go up like a rocket and down like a feather. And that's in part because if you are a wholesale distributor and you buy the gasoline at a higher price, you're not going to lower the price at your pump until you've worked your way through that entire tank. But the bigger issue here is that oil has yet to stabilize, and it could certainly re-rate higher. Even if the conflict ended today and traffic resumed through the Strait of Hormuz, it will take time for flows to resume. For one thing, all the tankers need to be repositioned. And then estimates now say that some 7 million barrels per day of production is offline. And so that will also need to be ramped back up. And it is not as easy, as just flipping a switch. And so all of that means that the next move for oil is unknown. And at the very least, we probably won't be returning to the high 60s we saw the last week of February. And since oil makes up more than half the cost of a gallon of gasoline, that means higher prices are likely here to stay, at least for the time being, Chris.